My name is Michael Penn, and once again, I will be your host for today's episode. So today we are going to look a little bit at a more specific sector within Japan, and that is the food tech sector. And we have a very good guest to let us get an orientation on what's involved in that. Her name is Jennifer Perez, and she is a sourcing analyst for the Future Food Fund, which is the first corporate venture fund in Japan, which is focused on food and agriculture. And she also is related to that, involved in the corporate planning department of Oisix Radaichi, another company based here in Tokyo. So the topics we're going to deal with today include looking at the strength of Japan food culture as a basis for the food tech sector. Uh, we're also going to look at the startup environment specifically as it relates to food tech. We're going to note the importance of quality of agriculture. The sort of Japanese quality that's inherent in not only food tech but in food service in general in Japan. And of course, we always will take a look at the question of infrastructure and support, and there's considerably more as well. So let's go ahead and get to the interview, and here it is. Okay, Jennifer, thank you for joining us. So first of all, why don't you just introduce yourself a little bit? Who are you, and what is it that you're working with right now?
Hi, thank you, Michael, for inviting me on your podcast. As you mentioned, I am Jennifer here with the Future Food Fund in Tokyo. Um, Really simply put, the Future Food Fund is Japan's first dedicated corporate venture capital fund that's investing in pretty much the farm to the fork, early stage seed to Series A startups, and really working strategically with these startups to connect them with our limited partners and the greater food and agricultural ecosystem in Japan to power up the ecosystem here in Japan and create a little bit of noise.
Okay, well, I have a number of sort of strings within that which I'd like to pull apart. But first of all, you say that the Future Food Fund is the first of these. So what is it in particular that is unique or pioneering about the Future Food Fund?
Right. So, as I had mentioned, yeah, we are the first corporate venture capital fund that's dedicated to investing in food and agriculture. Previously, um, our kind of parent company, which is Oisix Radaichi, they were investing off of their balance sheet and, made investments here and there, about, I don't know, 5 or 6 of them, I guess, over the course of a couple of years. And then really realized that there's only so much we could do with just our own resources, whether that's, monetary, like a capital, or the people resources as well. So about a year ago, we decided to set up the fund and reach out to the other movers and shakers within the food sphere here in Tokyo and actually Japan in general, and got together to build up this fund. And it's kind of a unique in the sense that you think investing in food, really it's going to be these big food players and maybe a couple of agricultural companies as well. But our LPs come from all sorts of backgrounds, which is pretty unique, I think, in the fact that we have, TV Tokyo, and then we also have companies coming out of like electricity, like Kansai Denryoku, and also media, like Orange Page. So it's really a wide set of partners that we're working with. And I think just having that is also kind of one of our unique points and a strength.
Okay, well, let's start with that. So you mentioned that there's a great diversity. TV Tokyo isn't exactly something I would think of when I'm thinking about investment in food tech. Why is it that there is such a wide range of Japanese companies that have taken notice of this sector and think that it's something they want to be involved in?
Myself, being a foreigner, I can appreciate the Japanese food culture, right? And everyone understands that there is something inherently good and delicious about Japanese food. And then there's the innovation that is really round, right? So when we think about food tech and the future of food in Japan, it's just kind of brilliant to be frank. And a lot of other companies have realized that there's something here that's interesting. And if you take a look, so okay, we pulled out TV Tokyo, right? So what are they doing? What does it have to do with food? But actually, they have quite a few projects within food, and they run an e-commerce site, and then also have all these TV shows showcasing kind of local delicacies and things like that. So if you dig a little bit, you'll see there's a lot of correlation.
Well, that's a very good point. Um, I think you're definitely right to suggest that Japan is kind of a food or cuisine superpower in the world. I mean, some years ago I was in Beirut, Lebanon, and there are Japanese restaurants there. It's all over. But
Right.
Japan's not necessarily known as a startup superpower. So where would sort of the food tech or the startup scene in Japan related to food rank compared to what's going on internationally?
Yeah, that's a good question, I think. You're totally right. There's a whole bunch of legacy companies here in Japan um, that are just after 200, 300 years still doing phenomenous. And when it comes to startups, it is a little bit more difficult or challenging for especially maybe young people to say, I'm going to start my own company rather than graduate and do what's sort of expected, like go to a large corporation and work there until you retire. And that's kind of what's been the way it's been done for a very long time. But it's not sustainable perhaps anymore. And the fact that there is so much talent here, it's a real shame. So a lot of companies have noticed that rather than trying to, start from zero and have your own internal, venture and spend all that time in R&D, you can pair up with these really interesting startups and kind of leapfrog the technology. Um, I don't know, when you think about food tech, probably the example that comes to everyone's mind is Beyond Meat, right? And the Impossible Burger. But when you look at the core ideas behind it, I think a lot of that really can be traced back to Japan. They were making tofu burgers, how many hundreds of years ago, right? But yeah, it's pretty interesting to see these large corporations trying to innovate and work very closely with startups as well.
Okay, well, you mentioned that the food tech where we imagine sort of vegan burgers and things like this, which is certainly true. But are there themes in the Japanese food tech scene that are being explored that are different from that, or is that the main line of what they're doing here as well?
Yeah, when we think about food tech, there is this kind of new food, and then there's also the biotech kind of side of it. In Japan, we're seeing a little bit of both. Um, there's a really interesting startup, Integra Culture, and they are growing, meat out of cells, right? And then, of course, you can see that same kind of technology or comparable technology in a lot of other foreign startups as well. And looking here at Japan, I can't really say there is one trend that's really leading the pack, but I do see a lot of strengths, um, not just in the food, consumables, but also the technology behind it. So whether that's robotech or um, these kind of management systems for either retail or for the farm, things like that.
I think it was last year I was given a tour in Ishikawa Prefecture of Ruby Roman grapes, which are extremely expensive grapes. I think they're now selling the best ones for about $500 per grape. Uh,
My
so
goodness, wow.
there's sort of this very there's a focus in certain parts of the Japanese agricultural scene of making very high quality fruit and vegetables and things like this. Is this a theme or a space where some startups are working as well?
Oh yeah, we're seeing a lot of that. And actually, some interesting activity is a lot of these startups are recognizing, okay, Japanese quality is not only prized within Japan, but of course internationally. And I just met a startup recently who was growing strawberries, and they moved to just out of New York City, kind of New Jersey area, and they're selling strawberries. I think like I don't know, 1 pound for like $100 or something. It was just really pricey. And the idea is to be able to bring the Japanese level of precision and quality to an international audience. And obviously, people are buying it and they're liking it.
I gather that part of what the Future Food Fund is doing is to help build some of the infrastructure for food tech startups in Japan. Can you talk a little bit about what you have been doing and what needs still to be done to strengthen food tech in Japan?
Sure. Um, when we started this fund about a year ago, we really recognized the need to pull together the resources. Money is not really the issue here. And people, there are a lot of really innovative and brilliant people here too. But what we needed to see was really a platform where consumers could actually get their hands on the technology, and where the startups could go ahead and beta test what they're doing to get real feedback. And so, yeah, as of last year, within OI6 Radaitsu, who is one of our LPs for the fund, we created this small page called the Craft Market, and it's dedicated site on the oi6.com where we sell products that are made by the startups themselves. And it's really just a couple of weeks to a month where we'll sell these items for a spot time, and then work really closely with the startups to not only give them the customer feedback, but help them to grow and learn how to work with kind of large scale purchasers, and how to do all these little details like that are involved in buying and the logistics that maybe they don't have up to speed yet. So that's, yeah, one of our big projects that we were working on over the past year or so.
This is Michael Penn breaking in here just to remind our podcast listeners that if we want to continue far into the year 2021 and beyond, we do need your support. And the way that you can give us that support is to check into our Patreon page, which you'll find under the name Shingetsu News Agency. That's Shingetsu News Agency. That's the name of our mother company. And also to follow our daily news service related to Japan technology and innovation. You'll find it at Akihabara News. And that's going to be both a web page and social media such as Facebook and Twitter and much more. So please check us out there. And well, let's get back to the interview. Looking, 5 or 10 years ahead, what else do you think is necessary to really put Japan food tech on the international map?
I think we need to see a couple of really strong exits and create that kind of jiseki. So we need to create this pattern of winners in a sense, whether that's through M&A or through an IPO, and just show that there is space for food tech and for ag tech, and obviously, if you try, you can make it. And right now, perhaps there's a little bit of anxiety because no one's really done it before. And so once we get a couple of home runs, then I think things will really start to pick up pace, and everything will start to move.
You say there haven't been any home runs. Have there been any doubles or triples? I mean, I mean, what would be sort of like historically the most successful startup so far that might have gotten picked up by one of the bigger companies or whatever?
In Japan, there's not too many. I mean, if we're talking about food startups within the past 10 or 20 years or so, um, yeah, there were not a lot, to be honest. Um, Later stage M&As and IPOs that have taken a while, those do exist. But really, these kind of moonshots that in 5 years they IPO, we haven't seen that yet.
And I presume, though, that your future food fund is expecting and helping to support them to move in that direction. And I see, at least based on your webpage, you have about half a dozen companies that you're invested in. Um, what's your own, I mean, outlook on that? I mean, are these half a dozen the ones that you're going to invest all your time in, or are we expecting your portfolio to grow significantly in the years ahead?
So we still have about 2 years left in our investment period for this first fund. So we're looking for interesting startups who are not only located in Japan but kind of internationally as well. And really, after that, we'll spend the next around 7 to 8 years working with them to accelerate their business, to help them grow, and eventually see that successful exit.
And I understand that you also have considerable interest in not only Japanese food tech, but also international firms. What's your viewpoint on that?
Yeah, that's correct. We're when we look at food tech, it's really a global issue and a global thing that we're working with our limited partners, not only in Japan, but also um, our partners who are in the US and other places as well. And the idea is to form this kind of community and open communication of ideas and knowledge sharing. And so that it's not just our startups here in Japan that are pushing innovation, but really it's this global communication that's happening.
And how much of a part, I mean, Japan startups in general, are often known to be somewhat inward looking. Is that also characteristic of food tech, or are there opportunities for entrepreneurs in Japan to meet with people doing similar projects overseas? Are there different kinds of groups that come together either online or physically that allow them to exchange ideas and maybe even personnel?
I think that's very true about looking, inwards, but um, I've also found that the startups that we're working with are very excited about looking abroad as well. And so some of the things that we've done together is kind of well, of course, because of the situation now with coronavirus, we haven't been able to do any live events, but we've done a couple of online events with some of our partners in the US and had kind of information exchange with similar startups there, and really started the initial conversations of, what is food tech, and then also, springing off from there of what's interesting in what's happening in the US or wherever you may be, and vice versa. Those who have interest in Japan get to know a little bit more about what's going on here.
Rhetorically, more and more often, the Japanese government officials are talking about startups and saying that they'd like to see more of that, and there do seem to be prefectural and other governments starting to set up or trying to set up their own hubs of
Yeah.
various kinds of startups. To what extent do you feel that the level of government support in Japan, is what it needs to be? I mean, is that part of the puzzle already in place, or is there work to be done there as well?
I'm really grateful for everything that the government has done to help really push uh, the entrepreneurial spirit, but the work is never done, right? Um, Even places like Singapore, where it's relatively easy to start a company and there's lots of government-backed grants. If we look at them, there's probably still room for growth and for improvement. Um, so I think Japan is definitely within the past couple of years uh, really started to make movements towards becoming more friendly towards young entrepreneurs and to those who have the kind of startup mentality, but we're not exactly where we need to be in order to see the kind of growth and uh, that the disruption, as they say, that needs to happen really.
Well, if you were to get your wish list, what would it be? I mean, where will these food tech entrepreneurs really love to see more government support come in?
I think, as we had spoken a little bit earlier about, uh, working with international companies, things like that, maybe support on that realm. I don't know whether that would be in the form of just, easy matching or to help them get through legislative issues. I think that could be really helpful and maybe wouldn't require that much legwork or that much kind of infrastructure to set up something like that.
Okay, and I think probably the last question from me is, when I think about agriculture in Japan, I think of JA, Japan Agriculture, huge, national network, and very, has a reputation at least of being sort of very tradition bound and not very innovative. Do the Japan startups have any relationship with Japan agriculture? Is there any support there, or is it an obstacle? I mean, so far, what is the relationship between food tech in Japan and Japan agriculture?
Yeah, well, I think you hit the nail right on the head when you said that, JA is huge, they're a monolith. And in a sense, if you want to succeed within uh, ag tech or food tech, you need to know JA very well. And if there is a way that you can work together with them, um, that's going to help your chances of succeeding.
But you don't have any great examples of startups that have made that connection, I presume.
Oh, right off the top of my head, I don't know if I can throw one out at you, but I do know there are a lot of startups who are working with, the farmer network of Japan agriculture, and once you get in there, it becomes a lot easier to navigate that sphere.
Okay, great. And my last question is an open one. Is there something that I should have asked you about that I didn't, regarding either the future of food fund or food tech in Japan in general, that you'd like to comment on before we wrap up this section of the podcast?
Sure, thank you for asking. I guess one thing I would like to maybe mention is that Um, yes, Japan is really steeped in tradition, and there are these legacy companies who seem on the outside very rigid and kind of adverse to change. But many of these, companies are actually very forward-thinking, and they have the desire to innovate and to specifically, work with these innovative startups and don't know exactly where they would fit. And so I think it needs to be a two-way street. Whereas, if you find these startups, you need to have the gumption or the way to reach out to the large corporations and say, you know what, this is my plan for you, and this is how I'm going to work with you. And once we can get this communication going, I think a lot of change is going to happen. And it's exciting to be in food tech, especially in Japan, where things are just coming into existence. So, the next 5, 10 years, I just would like to keep watching what's happening, and we're going to see something big, I think.
Okay, well, we here at the Japan Startup Megaphone podcast would love to see something big, and we'll be following it. So, thank you very much, Jennifer, for joining us today. I think we have got good orientation for food tech in Japan going forward, and it's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Great. Thank you, Michael, for having me on. It was great talking with you too.
Well, thank you for joining us, and check us out on our website, Akihabara News, or one of our social medias under Akihabara News. And of course, as mentioned previously, if you want to support us, the way to do that is to check into Patreon, and you'll find that under our mother company's name, Shingetsu News Agency. Thanks again, and have a great time.